Thank you and good afternoon to all of you, and thank you very much for your presence. Dominic and I focused on what needs to be done in our three work streams. Number one, a backstop solution for avoiding a hard border on the island of Ireland. Number two, the other outstanding issues of the withdrawal agreement, for instance, the protection of existing geographical indications, amongst others. Three, the political declaration on our future relationship. Our teams will sit together again tomorrow to try and make progress. Last week, our teams already had a discussion on Island of Ireland and Northern Ireland. As you know, we need a legally operational backstop in the withdrawal agreement. We must find pragmatic solutions in line with the commitments made by Prime Minister May in December and March. And we must de-dramatize the issue and spell out which controls are needed, where and how they should be done. Next time we meet, Dominic and I, we will take stock on this work. The negotiations are now entering the final stage. We have agreed that the EU and the UK will negotiate continuously from now on. And Dominic and I will meet regularly to take stock and move the negotiations forward. Ladies and gentlemen, the principles of the EU in these negotiations are well known and have been consistent for the last 2 years. They have been defined by the EU leaders with a great sense of responsibility for the European project and the integrity of the single market. Also, the EU respects the choices made by the UK government. We can find common ground based on the EU principles on the one hand, and on the other hand, the choices made by the UK. As I said in July, we are far more advanced in defining that common ground for foreign policy and security than for the economic relationship. Our challenge for the coming weeks is to try and define an ambitious partnership between the UK and the EU, a partnership that has no precedent. This partnership has to respect the single market and the foundations of the European project. And if this is well understood, we can conclude the negotiations successfully. Now I give the floor to Dominic.
Well, Michel, thank you, and can I thank you and your team for hosting us today. We've had a positive set of discussions which have been very useful on all of the three main categories of issues: the withdrawal agreement, outstanding separation issues. On Northern Ireland, we've reaffirmed our commitment to the undertakings in the joint report, but we must come up with solutions that are deliverable for the communities affected. That's the key. On the future relationship, we also talked both about the economic partnership and areas where we've made some good progress, I think, on the security cooperation. There are still some significant issues to overcome. Yes, on Northern Ireland, I think we both recognise that, but also on the future relationship. And it's important to view the whole deal as a package. We agreed that we need to step up the intensity of the negotiations as we come into the final phase, and we've agreed to meet regularly and resolve at the political level those outstanding issues that remain under technical consideration. And I'm pleased that with Michel we've agreed to meet next week, I hope for longer, on all of those issues. And I think it's absolutely vital. There are still gaps, and we've had an honest conversation about those. Equally, on our side, we feel we've shown the ambition, the energy and the pragmatism, and I know how committed Michel is to securing a deal. And if we have that ambition, that pragmatism and that energy on both sides, I'm confident we can reach the agreement in October. Thank you very much.
Okay, time will allow us for 2 questions. We start with Mark.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mark Stone from Sky News. Mr. Barnier, to you first of all, if I may. Some in the UK will listen to what you just said, and they will openly now say, as some already have been saying, to hell with it. We leave with no deal because the EU side is simply not budging one bit. You talk about the principles being clearly defined for the past 2 years, and you simply haven't moved. What's your response to that? You don't appear to be budging on the EU side to what the Brits are saying is a negotiation and that they have moved. For you, Mr. Raab, a lot of people in the UK, I think, will be quite confused because the prospect of no deal apparently is now very high. Some in your party, some of whom are in government, are saying that no deal is fine, that it's not something we should be scared of. Others are saying that no deal would be a disaster. You say you're not planning for a deal, but on Thursday you are planning for no deal. On Thursday you're clearly going to plan for no deal. What's the reality? How likely is no deal, and is it good or is it bad? Can you be honest with the public? And a very quick final thought for you, Mr. Barnier. I haven't heard you use your hill walking analogies for quite some time. You talk about walking in the hills, you like walking in the hills. You talked about it a lot before. Where are we on this Brexit journey right now?
Hey. Quand on marche en montagne,
When you
je dis
walk in
souvent qu'il faut
mountains,
garder son souffle.
I often say that it's all a question of breath. You have to be careful, of course, about what's going on either side of you and things that might fall on your heads, and you have to look towards the summit. Normally, you don't make speeches every 5 minutes when you're walking in the hills, do you? You save your breath. It's a long path, and we're not at the end of it yet. You said that we haven't changed our principles over 2 years. But why would we? How can you change principles on which the European Union is based? Why would you? The European Union, the UK is leaving the European Union. It's not the other way around. The UK is leaving, and it's their choice, and we respect that choice whilst regretting it. But the European Union is based on principles and values, on rules. It is a whole ecosystem which is integrated of rules and laws and standards, of supervision, of certification, etc., which the UK knows very, very well, because we built it together, didn't we? And we've been building it over some 40 or so years together. So those principles will remain our principles, because that's the way it is. They're the principles that we've been working on and on which the single market is based. If that is well understood, I think that we can still find common ground, I've called it, between the guidelines of the European Council, which represent my mandate. 27 heads of state and government decided that, and the white paper, which I promised to study seriously, and I'm doing, because there are points of agreement. Dominic said something about internal security, external security, defence. On many subjects, there's agreement, and we will be able to build this future declaration. But I say this very frankly because I owe the truth to you about the question of the economic relation. There are still areas of disagreement, because what is in the white paper contradicts in some areas, on some points, things which are my guidelines, the guidelines of the European Council. On other things, there's convergence. An ambitious free trade agreement is a point on which we would agree.
Well, first of all, I just should say that I agree with Michel that we need to keep, as we climb the mountain, our eyes on the summit and accentuate the positive. And there are many positive areas where we agree. But of course, we've got to close down those areas of disagreement. On the question you asked me about no deal, look, our actions speak louder than words. We're out here I'm here seeing Michel again. I should be returning next week. We're going to be picking up the intensity of the negotiations. We agree on that. At the political level, we need to vitalise these talks and get issues out of technical discussion into political resolution. But of course, the responsible thing for any government to do, and indeed on the EU side to do, is to make sure that we're prepared for all eventualities from the negotiations.
The public didn't vote for a shortage of medicine, for example.
Look, as you will see when we set out our plans, some of these hair-raising scare stories are very far from the truth, and I look forward to explaining the context on Thursday. But for today, the overriding focus, and indeed in the weeks ahead, is trying to get the best deal, good for the UK, good for the EU.
Et la deuxième question, c'est pour Clément.
Bonjour, Clément Zampa pour l'AFP. Est-ce que la perspective d'un accord en octobre...
The idea of an agreement in October, how realistic is that now?
Il faut,
I think that
pour savoir ce qui est réaliste ou pas,
in deciding what's realistic and what's not realistic, you have to take the date that Theresa May chose for the departure of the United Kingdom from the European Union, the 30th of March. I think it's actually enshrined in law in the UK now. If you count backwards from that date, the 30th of March 2019, the day on which the UK will no longer be a member of the European Union, whilst remaining, if we reach an agreement, for 21 months in the single market and the customs union, and in European policies. Now, the countdown backwards from there towards now has to take account of the time which is necessary for ratification, because that's a given. It will take a certain amount of time to ratify it. The agreement on the UK side and on the European side, the Council of Ministers and the European Parliament. That takes us for a final decision on the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration well before the end of the year. I'm not going to say October, a few days here, beginning of November, but not much later than that, certainly.
Unless the Secretary of State wants to add something.
Well, only on the prospects of a deal. Look, there are three ingredients: ambition on the substance, energy, and pragmatism and compromise. And we're committed to that, and if it's matched, we get a deal. It's that simple.
Facing the probability of a hard Brexit, if you don't agree to something, could you imagine that maybe facing the big risk of a hard Brexit, to a revision of the decision, to say, okay, maybe it's for the Brits not the best thing to stay, but the risk and all these things could happen are even better than a hard Brexit. Could you imagine that you revise this process?
Certainly on the UK side, no. We will be leaving in March of next year. We'll be prepared for all eventualities from the negotiations. But again, we come here and I come here with renewed commitment and energy and vim and vigour to put into the negotiations to get ourselves across the line.
J'entends beaucoup le débat au Royaume-Uni sur...
I hear
That's where we'll leave Michel Barnier and Dominic Raab.